We're all taught that economics pretty much started in Europe with Adam Smith. But what if I told you the most critical warnings about a total financial meltdown weren't written by economists at all, but by a philosopher nearly 700 years before Adam Smith? We think economics is all about math and fancy models, right? Well, today we're diving into a much older idea that when an economy is about to shatter, the first cracks don't show up in the numbers, they show up in our morality. This isn't just some old quote, it's a diagnosis. And we're about to unpack a warning from the 11th century that describes our modern financial world with, frankly, terrifying accuracy. This is the story of how societies really unravel, not from a lack of money, but because the money itself has lost its soul. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with this incredible lost warning and break down what were called the three financial sins. Then we'll see how those very sins have just echoed through history and have literally been engineered into the system we use today. And finally, we'll ask the biggest question of all. Are we even capable of listening to this warning anymore? Okay, so our story kicks off with a man named Al-Ghazali. He was this absolutely brilliant scholar during the Islamic Golden Age. Now, he wasn't an economist like we think of one. Nope, he was a philosopher, a theologian. But what he saw was a kind of sickness in society's bloodstream, in its money, and his diagnosis has never ever been more relevant than it is right now. To really get what he was saying, you have to picture his world. This was not some sleepy village. We're talking 11th century Baghdad. This was the London, the New York, the Tokyo of its day. It was the absolute heart of global trade, a place overflowing with wealth and brainpower. But in the middle of all that success, Al-Ghazali saw something wrong. He saw a society that was getting rich way faster than it was getting wise. He saw the rot starting to set in. And here's Al-Ghazali's big idea, which was completely radical for his time. He said money isn't actually valuable. It's just a tool, a mirror. All it's supposed to do is reflect the value of real things. Grain, labor, art. He said its real purpose was to circulate, to flow like blood, keeping the whole body of society healthy and alive. The moment it stops moving, or worse, the moment it stops reflecting anything real, that's when the sickness begins. Okay, so starting from that one big idea, Al-Ghazali laid out what he called the three great financial sins. And for him, these weren't just moral mistakes. No, he saw them as acts of social destruction, things that could bring an entire empire crashing down from the inside. Let's break them down. First up, hoarding. Locking up your wealth, doesn't matter if it's in a medieval treasure chest or a modern offshore bank account, was basically a crime against your community. Why? Because it stops the flow. It freezes the very lifeblood of society. Second, speculation. This is making a profit without actually contributing anything of value. Basically getting rich off of misery or just pure illusion. And number three, the one he thought was the most dangerous of all, debasement. That's when the government itself starts cheating, corrupting its own money and stealing from its own people. Let's start with speculation because its pattern throughout history is just so obvious once you see it. Al-Ghazali called it a moral crime. Today, we often just call it finance. He warned us about profiting from illusion and, well, history is basically one long story of entire economies doing exactly that. And the pattern is just wild. It's this rhythm of mania that just repeats itself over and over again. An echo of delusion. Doesn't matter if it's tulip bulbs in the 1600s selling for the price of a mansion, or tech stocks in '99 with zero profits and billion-dollar valuations. The story is always the same. Some new thing comes along, and everyone gets euphoric, convinced that this time it's different. It never is. Now here's the key. Bubbles don't come out of nowhere. The internet was revolutionary. AI is transformative. But the bubble isn't about the tech. It's about that exact moment when the story completely detaches from reality. It's when eyeballs were more important than profits back in the dot-com days. Or when today, a company can lose billions and still be valued in the hundreds of billions, just because they dropped the letters AI into their pitch deck. And hey, sometimes speculation isn't just a craze, it's a straight-up scam. Enron cooked up some fancy accounting trick to pretend they had profits that were years away. Bernie Madoff used all this complicated jargon to describe what was, deep down, the oldest con in the book, a Ponzi scheme. Both of these are perfect examples of what Al-Ghazali was screaming about, creating this illusion of wealth with absolutely zero real contribution and leaving nothing but ruin behind. All right, now we get to the sin that Al-Ghazali saw as the most dangerous, the most treacherous of them all, debasement.
This is what happens when the state, the very entity that's supposed to guarantee the money, becomes its biggest counterfeiter. When the ruler becomes the thief, the ultimate bond of trust in society is just broken. The method has definitely gotten more sophisticated, but the logic, it is identical. Roman emperors would literally shave a little silver off of every coin so they could mint more of them, secretly watering down the value of everyone's money. Today, central banks don't need a file, they just add zeros to a computer screen. They give it a fancy name like quantitative easing, but the end result is exactly the same, creating money from thin air, which makes the savings of every single person holding that currency worth less. And Al-Ghazali predicted precisely what happens next. When people lose faith in their own money, they don't just complain, they create entirely new economies. The black market becomes the real market. We've seen this movie play out again and again in Weimar Germany, the Soviet Union, Argentina, Lebanon, places where regular people are scrambling to get their hands on US dollars or gold because they know their own government's currency is a melting ice cube. So here's where the story takes a sharp turn into our world today, connecting that ancient history to right now. Because those sins, hoarding, speculation, debasement, they aren't just things that greedy people do anymore. Over the last couple hundred years, they have been built into the very plumbing, the very architecture of the global financial system. This is the key shift right here. We're moving from individual moral failures to a global system that doesn't just allow this stuff to happen, it actively rewards it. What was once seen as a sin has been rebranded as a strategy. And this machine wasn't built in a day. It happened piece by piece. In the 1800s, you had banking dynasties turning national debt into a product to be traded, making entire countries dependent on private bankers. Then, in 1910, a secret meeting on a private island designs the U.S. Federal Reserve, putting control of the currency in the hands of a few. And since the 70s, you've had these committees in places like Basel, Switzerland, writing the rulebook for all the world's banks, making sure the whole system moves together. And this quote, which comes from a source on the Davos conferences, just nails it. That annual meeting of the global elite in the Alps, it's not some secret conspiracy. It's just the visible part of the iceberg. It's the powerful getting in a room and confirming they all see the world the same way. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly the way it was designed to centralize power and manage the flow of global money. And that brings us right back to where we started, back to Al-Ghazali's warning, echoing across 1,000 years of history. We've traced the sins he called out. Now we have to look in the mirror and ask if our modern, sophisticated world is any closer to actually getting his message. I mean, just think about our financial world. High-frequency trading is just speculation moving at the speed of light. Shadow banking is this massive system operating outside the old rules. And our entire global economy, it's built on fiat currencies, money backed by nothing but faith in the very institutions Al-Ghazali told us to be wary of. His 3 sins? They're not sins anymore. They're our operating system. This right here is Al-Ghazali's ultimate point. He was trying to tell us that an economy is a moral system first and a mathematical one second. He warned that when you separate money from real value and finance from basic ethics, you don't get a free market. You don't create prosperity. You start a clock. You begin a countdown to the moment when all that trust disappears and the whole thing comes crashing down. For 1,000 years, his diagnosis has been pretty much ignored, written off as some ancient philosophy that has nothing to do with our complex world. But when you look at the endless bubbles, the bailouts, the fact that our money gets more abstract by the day, you really have to wonder. His warning was never about the past. It was always about the future. The only question left is, can we still hear it?